Thanks very much, Rod. And thank you for being here. It's really great to read in the Tree series, the Legendary Tree series. This is a really neat night, because A, because there's some awesome friends here, and B, because Cameron Amnesty of Apartment 9 Press just released this chapbook of recent poems of mine called I Have Come to Talk About Manners. So I was originally going to read all fiction, but I'm going to read some poems from this first. It's a very gorgeous little book. It's on sale over there. And here we go. Father's Shave. Father shaves. Details follow. The blade rips the bristles from his cheeks, his chin, beneath his thunderous nose. It rips the carpet and the curtains, rips Sylvester the cat right off the TV screen. We children cry. The blade rips the welcome mat off our porch, the grass off our lawn, the trees off our block, oh, weeping willows. Father goes to the office. His boss caresses his smooth face, the clients ooh and ah. The streets are bare of cars. One planet hurtles into another. There are no prizes in a bag of cheesies. Button pink elephant popcorn. You get a little sticker or maybe a tiny soldier with parachute. You can drop out your second floor window. Look, he drifts down. He drifts in the breeze. The jays and sparrows gaze on in wonder. The event. The event takes place. Sounds are heard. You exist. Not yet. I suffocate in the treetops. There is storm. A wave of feeling becomes furious. Oh, flower twisting in isolation. My eye is sharp. My punctuation comes from the deep. You are born a victim. We live in adoring flames. Let's see, what else I have here? Looking for poems I have not ever read here before. Oh, what is weird? Okay. This is, I'm going to read a couple of centos. This is called Embassy Sonnet, a cento. Ask me something. Come on, questions. If I were Nancy Drew, I could tap my way among the gods, gobbled by snores to the stately snails supposedly accompanied by focaccia. I used to play cowboys in sweatpants and Nikes. What did I learn about my kinfolk? The world is the decay of the world. The air is some torn up paper floating. And so I plan to go to the Canadian Embassy as a small South American squirrel. The guy who cut off my head, he used to have 5 sisters. And let's get to the back here, and I'll back up a little. This is a cento made entirely of lines by Al Purdy. This was for, what was it for? A fundraiser for the A-Frame House took place last spring. Cento for Al Purdy. He begins to speak like a small storm cloud, and hills under our feet tremble. And a small rain like tears from the hot fields under a million merciless suns reach across the distance of tonight. Years later at Ameliasburg, I remembered that blind dog under a faithless moon. It was a heartwarming moment for literature, a thud and a cry, love and hate, doing push-ups under an ancient Pontiac. 5 minutes ago, I was young. 5 minutes ago, we were very happy. But my hate was holy as kosher foreskins then. And the quick are dead, and the dead grow hands. The goldfinch repairs his nest with a patchwork of sunset. Fingers like fireflies on the typewriter as earth shapes and reshapes itself, suspended between stars in an imaginary town. I knew a guy once who would buy a single drop of the rain and mists of Baffin, as if a child had clapped his hands into the tips of falling leaves. I've seen these trees spilling down mountains like golfers searching for a lost ball, a necklace strung together inside the brain's small country. Light comes and goes from a ghostly sun on both sides of the swan. But first they cut off his fingers beside my crumbling little house, standing in a patch of snow, in the silvery guts of a laboring, terribly useful lifetime, which reminds me I'd better hurry and get out. And I think I'm just going to end off the poems with a poem that I wrote for my 50th birthday last July. 50 words, 5 hours before 50 plus 50 more. 50 chairs around a table, 50 collapsing cottages, 50 pairs of corduroy pants, 50 runaway weather balloons, 50 reasons to stop, 50 shadowy phantoms, 50 fireflies dancing in Jersey, 50 reasons to continue. 50 rocks on my parents' headstone, 50 unhummable songs, 50 gentle kisses, 50 exclamation marks. 50 light tracks in the snow, 50 tattered sedures, 50 attempts at reading How It Is, 50 noodles on my plate, 50 trips to Gravenhurst, 50 falling coconuts, 50 familiar grins, 50 insoluble regrets, 50 bobbing matzo balls, 50 black poodles named Rufus carrying me to the edge of a shimmering lake. So that's the poetry portion of my reading. I'm going to read, I have this new book, well, pretty new book anyway, it's called Buying Cigarettes for the Dog. And it was published by Freehand Books in Calgary last April. And it's in second printing. And there are copies over there. And I like a lot of it, but I'm more excited about newer stuff, so I'm going to read a bunch of new stories. And maybe I'll start off with this one over here. For those of you who are my Facebook friends, you will know a certain obsession of mine. Start off. This is actually the title of, tentatively the title of a short story collection that I'm working on, or if I keep writing and enough short stories appear for a collection, this is what I'd like to call it, is probably a better way of putting it. I am Claude Francois, and you are a bathtub. You hold me in your porcelain arms and I lie in your warmth. The room is filled with steam and the scent of eucalyptus. I am acutely aware of my breathing. In a life that seems to move so quickly, this is a moment I savor. Soon I stand, my feet caressed by a puddle of draining water. A light flickers against my face, making me blink, and I reach up towards the lamp to tighten the bulb. If there is no light, then my beauty is invisible. And I count among my beauty the deep creases around my eyes, around the edges of my mouth, the startling squareness of my once round chin. I become older with each year, while the women who dance on stage with me, they remain the same age. When my fingers touch the light fixture, there is electricity. It begins in my toes and my fingertips and converges in my groin. It is like the electricity I feel between me and an audience when I am on stage singing Cette année-là or Magnolias Forever. I wear a suit of silver. The lapels of my jacket are wide. I collapse back into your arms and I am dead. I am 39. Have I told you about my legs? They number 2, and they slide comfortably into tapered black trousers. Some have said they move impossibly, they defy nature, they move in spite of me. There are 2 of them, the same number each time I count, and they move in 2 ways. At times they are abstractions, they are like rubber, they twist and bow and slide beneath my rigid torso. Other times they are like 10th grade mathematics. Their angles are precise, rudimentary, nearly mechanical. They swivel beneath me like a lazy Susan. The women who dance on stage with me, they follow my every move. They are elongated, lanky, beautiful. They wear just enough clothing that they are not naked. They wear a treble clef or an exclamation mark. I am not certain where they come from, but they are there on stage exactly when I need them. What I do, they do. But no, it is not hierarchical like that. We simply do together. In my face, you can always see joy, because when I perform, I am experiencing joy. When I sing, I become pure joy. Now, at nearly 40 and dead in your arms by electrocution, at the height of my triumphant comeback in a world now enchanted by disco, I'm a vessel of pleasure, just as I was at 18. I threw snowballs at the women, I dressed like a Mountie, I twisted through the snow, I chose the girl, she and I locked arms. I don't remember her name now, but I remember that she was cold out there in the snow and she was beautiful. I was born in Egypt. My mother encouraged me to study the piano and the violin, but I preferred drums and I taught myself to play the drums. Later, when we moved to Monaco, I played the drums with an orchestra on the French Riviera. I was just a teenager. My eyes were black orbs that communicated the bliss I felt. I was given the chance to sing, and though I had never studied singing, the audience liked what they heard, my unpracticed voice, its deep timbre. Inspired by this success, I went to Paris to make my fortune. I climbed into you nearly 2 decades later, into your curved and welcoming arms, your warmth. The origin of the Americanism electrocution lies in the words electricity and execution, and the French adds only an endearing cowlick to the first vowel with électrocution. It originally meant the intentional death of a condemned criminal, but later came to include any type of death induced by electric shock, such as the accidental death of a pop singer in his Paris apartment on March 11, 1978, as he bathed, intending to relax the day before the taping of a television appearance. I had avoided death so many times before. I fell, I stood, I fell, I stood, I fell, I stood, always accompanied by beautiful dancers. In 1971, I collapsed from exhaustion during a performance. In 1975, I was nearly obliterated by an IRA bomb. In 1977, a fan attempted to end my life through the barrel of a gun, a traditional expression of love that I cannot understand. I will never be on stage again. I will never again sing pop or rock and roll or disco. The camera will never capture the tenderness in my features as I sing a ballad. I fear for the girls, 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 and the grief they will feel at my death as the streets of Paris overflow with mourners. My intention was never to evoke grief. Even when I sang a sad song, a song like Ça pleure aussi un homme, I strove to convey a beauty that would conquer the sadness. I am blonde, and my eyes are dark, though they sparkle playfully. My smile is my best feature. See my legs go? I know what I am saying, but I don't know for certain what they are reading, those who read this. That is one of the tragic pitfalls of translation. That is how Comme d'habitude became My Way, a song with which it has nothing in common but melody and phrasing. Or so I am told by those for whom English is the mother tongue. One longs to embrace just a single sentence that could crash through the funhouse mirror of translation and reach the ears of one's readers with precision of intention, with a sacred purity. Would this were possible, for me, that sentence would be this: I existed for joy. So that's the autobiography of Claude François. You can find all sorts of wonderful moments of him on YouTube, and he's my hero and I live for him. I do. I live for Claude François. I think I'm going to read 2 more stories here. This is one I've never read aloud before. Let's see how it works out. Called Ladies and Gentlemen, the Solar System. Holy the monster that ricocheted off the spongy stars. Ugly astronaut without an oxygen tank drifted amid the planets, drifted amid the planets, drifted amid the planets. I left my wallet at home. I padded my empty pockets. I was to be arrested for theft. The police were tireless. Then, in an alley, I found cash. Soon everything would be different. I experienced equal parts fear and regret. The trees knew, and the birds. A contorted face peered over the crumbling wall of brick that surrounded the crumbling Safeway grocery store that was filled with shoppers whose shirts were torn and stained by mustard. Mr. Nightingale, who was watching from a van covered in Rorschach tests, recognized the face immediately. It was he was transported back to grade 2 phys ed class and a deft kick in the ribs. The trees knew, and the birds, that my liver was in the gut of another man. They stared into the inky night sky and stretched their branches and wings as far as they could manage, the moon glistening off the exact center of their foreheads. One by one, each man and woman stepped forward from the crowd of mourners and yanked the spade out of the pile of earth, dug it back in, and scooped up a clod of the displaced ground and threw it on top of the coffin. A mammal was of indeterminate temperament. The paparazzi, fueled and foul-smelling, followed it everywhere, flashbulbs exploding. It was all over the newspapers. People talked of nothing else. For weeks, it seemed. My pockets were filled with money now, with money. Pockets that had for so long been empty. My eyes widened. I began to see stores everywhere. A year later, she placed a small rock on top of the headstone. This was a thing that Jews did, this placing of rocks atop headstones, and she didn't know what was behind it. She had never asked him, and now, as in so many other matters, it was too late. A page filled with what appeared to be instructions floated by, in an alphabet the astronaut had never seen before. He reached for it and missed, nearly losing his balance. The trees knew, and the birds. The leaves of the trees and the feathers of the birds. The planets knew, and the sun, the stars, the space junk. The reflection caught in a bedroom window of a woman holding her face in her hands. Soon everything would be different. People talked of nothing else. The lobby doors of the hotel locked automatically and the guests backed away towards the elevators. The PA system crackled and sputtered, but no voice came on. The elevators remained stationary. A man hooked up to an IV drip reached into his pocket and took out a paperback book. He began reading aloud. The citizens badmouthed the city. Where had they found the courage? We swayed beneath the impermeable armor of the polite clouds. An echo scraped across the surface of the empty football field. All that was certain was that there was no certainty. Then, rain. Then, locusts. Then, the death of the firstborn. Someone got a great idea for a TV show. Okay, I'm going to sneak, before I do the last of the news stories, I'm going to have more time than I thought left, so I'm going to sneak in one story from buying cigarettes for the dog. Am I going to read that? Am I going to read that again? I feel like I'm going to read that one again, that I always read. I feel in the mood to read it. I don't know. But or I could read something else. No? Okay. I'm going to read that. No, it just makes me angry every time I read it. I don't know. I feel like I'm a David Donnell reading here. The eyebrows keep flapping up and down and the reading never actually happens. I'm going to read this instead. I will not honor my anger. I'll read this instead. Okay. The president's cold legs. The president fell into the river and his legs got cold and he ended up in a wheelchair. I was pushing him along the sidewalk and someone with lots of shopping bags stopped us and said, "Did you know that's the president you're pushing there in that wheelchair?" Well, sure I knew. This was the president with the cold legs. Later on in my room, I wrote in my notebook, "The president likes how I push him along the sidewalk." Then I put my pencil down and waited for the phone to ring again. Whenever they needed me to push the president in his wheelchair, they would phone me up and I would go to his house. I noticed that the wallpaper up near my ceiling was beginning to peel. I'd tell the president about that the next time I pushed him along the sidewalk. I mean, he wouldn't fix it himself because of his cold legs and all, but he'd send someone to stick my peeling wallpaper back up. And also, my pencil was worn down to just about a stub. I hoped maybe he would get me a new pencil. He would say, "I will give you money for a new pencil because of how good you pushed me on the sidewalk." We'd stop outside a drugstore and he'd give me a handful of change and tell me to go on in and buy a new pencil. I don't like to leave him alone like that, but he says he's safe because he's a good president and everyone likes him. Aside from pushing the president along on the sidewalk, I do other things too. At night, I sleep. Also, when I was a little boy, I took my dog Rufus for walks, but not with a wheelchair. Rufus sniffed the back ends of other dogs that other boys were walking. I got a B in geography once. In the school band, we played a song called "Suicide is Painless," which was the song they played on a TV show that everyone watched then. My father really liked that show a lot, and later he jumped off a big building, so I don't know what that means. Like most subjects, history was not my best subject at school. And sometimes when I push the president in his wheelchair, I get scared he'll ask me a question where I have to know who was another president in history. I tried to memorize the names of every president once, but all I could remember was Spumoni, because it was hot and I wanted ice cream. One time at the post office, I was standing in line to buy some stamps, and a man with a little hat came over and did a dance in front of me. It lasted a long time, and when it was finished, he said, "Will you hire me now?" Which probably meant would I hire him to do a dance. But I needed my money for stamps, and I couldn't afford it. Later, when I was pushing the president along the sidewalk, I asked him if he wanted to hire the man with the little hat to do a dance for him. He didn't say words, he just laughed. And I laughed too, but I didn't know why we were laughing. Every year I have a birthday, but no one told me when I started, so I don't know how old I am. I don't know whether I am younger or older than the president. I think that I am younger, though, because he calls me son. If I was older, he would call me father. Once, when it was my birthday, the president gave me a tape recording. He said that the man on the tape was a man named Hank Williams, and he liked him best of all singers, and that I reminded him of Hank Williams. I stopped pushing the president's wheelchair, and I looked at the picture of the man on the tape. He had a cowboy hat on, but I wasn't wearing a hat. The president must have made a mistake. When I got home that day, I tore the plastic paper off of the tape recording, which I had to use my teeth to do. I went to the door of my next door neighbor, who was a nice woman with very big earlobes and a blue dress, and I asked her if she could play the tape for me because I don't have a tape recorder. She said okay, and that I should come in and sit down. Then she put the tape the president gave me for my birthday in her tape recorder, and she asked me where I got the tape. "The president with the cold legs," I told her. And just as I said that, we heard music, just like those were the magic words that made the tape start singing. Me and the nice woman listened to the whole tape of Hank Williams, and then we listened to it again. "He sounds like a very sad man," the woman said to me. In my room, I lay in my bed and thought about sadness and how I feel sorry for people who are sad. I wondered why people would feel sad if it makes them so sad. I tried to make myself sad by thinking about that my parents were dead and that I didn't know how old I was and that my pencil was really short and that if the president's legs hadn't gotten so cold when he fell in the river, he'd be able to walk like normal people. But nothing made me feel sad. Sometimes when I push the president along the sidewalk, I can see that he is sad, but he doesn't sing songs like Hank Williams that sound like he's crying. I push his wheelchair faster so that he will have fun, and I tell him funny stories about my dog Rufus. For example, sometimes when I walked Rufus, he would smell the back ends of other dogs that other boys were walking. Plus, when he got killed by the car in front of our house, my father held him up by his rear legs, and it looked like he was smiling the way his tongue hung out of his mouth. You shouldn't fall in a river because the river makes your legs cold and then you can't walk, and I have to push you around in a wheelchair along the sidewalk. And I don't really have time for that because I have to push the president. And when I'm not pushing him, I have to sit in my room and look at my phone until somebody somewhere else dials my number and makes it ring. When the president turns dead because the cold goes up from his legs into his heart, I will have to be the president. I will sit in his wheelchair, and a man will push me along the sidewalk. When the man's pencil gets so short he can't even hold it or fit it into the sharpener, I will give him money to buy a new pencil. "Faster! Push me faster!" I'll yell when I'm sad. Then I'll point at a pointy rock on the ground and say, "We sure are moving faster than that rock." Maybe when I am the president, I will know how to be sad. With a pencil, I will write a book about rocks and about sadness. When my pencil gets short, a man will bring me another pencil. My friends from school, although I did not have any friends at school, will come and visit me in my house. I will have a tape recorder when I am the president, and I will play my Hank Williams tape that the president gave me. I will tell my friends, the president gave me this tape. When I pushed him along the sidewalk, I looked like Hank Williams, even if I didn't wear a hat. And then my friends, which I don't have, will say how sad Hank Williams sounds. And I'll say that I know what they mean, because I will be the president. And am I reading this wrong here? I feel like okay, that's good. Okay, so I think that segues really nicely into this last story I was going to read. And before I read this, I want to thank you again all for being here, and I want to thank Steve Brockwell, who's not here, for inviting me, and Rod and Rona for putting up with me at this series. And I want to also, a little commercial. This Saturday at 2 p.m. at Parliament Hill, Steve Brockwell and I and a whole bunch of local poets are going to be launching a book called Rogue Stimulus, the Stephen Harper Holiday Anthology for a Pro-Rogue Parliament, with poems by 72 Canadian poets in it. And then in the evening, just before the AB series, at Gallery 101, we're going to have at 6 o'clock a sort of a little indoor launch for that. So I hope you can make it and bring zillions of friends. Together we will topple Stephen Harper. The United States has gone crazy. Here's a blender. Look at all the buttons and dials on it. Put stuff in it and turn it on. This is what the blender does. It takes solids and reduces them to something more manageable, encourages them to mingle. Carrots and potatoes, ice cream and shards of chocolate. It takes two entirely different liquids and turns them into one all-new liquid. Coca-Cola and milk, for example. Outside the window, a horse tugs a wagon down the street. The man on the wagon is sepulchral and wears a tall black hat. He speaks to the horse almost without breathing, like he's ordering a coffee and toast, extra butter. I've never seen him before. He will come to be known as the stranger, especially when he rides into a new town, silent but for the clomping of horse hooves. The women of the town will peek at him through slightly parted curtains. When he looks, his head barely turning, he'll just see the curtains swaying ever so slightly. Meanwhile, everyone's family is torn asunder. The brothers bicker over whether their cousin's child is a cousin once removed or a second cousin. Husbands and wives don't know how they've put up with each other for so long. They roll their eyes and grind their teeth. The children refuse to pick the lice out of each other's hair. Grandfather hurls his false teeth into the creek behind the house. Okay, then this. A whistling sound emanating from the sky. The United States has gone crazy and is bombing everyone again. All the other countries raise their gigantic metal domes, and it sounds like it's raining and you're sleeping in a room with a corrugated tin roof. You dream of broad-shouldered men who need to shave and whose sweat has soaked through their shirts. They lob explosives at each other, then duck their heads beneath their arms. A parking lot has only one car in it, and the car is upside down. This is terror. This is what terror is. The family boards a plane to fly across the ocean, to visit where grandfather was born. Grandfather has trouble breathing and is attached to a machine, so he cannot go. An announcement is announced. There is a rat on the plane. A lady saw a rat. The passengers are asked to look under their seats, but no one sees the rat. The passengers are asked to stomp their feet so that the noise and vibrations will drive the rat from its hiding place. The pilot fears that the rat has made its way into the plane's mechanism. The passengers are asked to leave the plane and take all their personal belongings. The family goes home and grandfather won't let them in. The stranger ties his horse to a post and walks into an eatery. He sits on a stool at the wooden counter and asks for a coffee and 6 slices of toast, no butter. While he's waiting, he digs into his pocket, finds a scrap of paper, and makes some notes on it. There is an enormous explosion outside and the floor of the eatery trembles. The stranger's writing hand veers off the scrap of paper, his pen gouging a trail through the wooden counter. He imagines what might happen if his hand just kept skidding away from him, off the counter, onto the floor, out the back door, and on towards whatever lies beyond, whatever lies beyond. The retractable metal domes that cover the countries outside the American borders, both on the same continent and those more distant, were manufactured in the late 1990s by a company called Countryhood Innovations. That's when they were manufactured, but they weren't installed until sometime later. It was tricky putting them up, but the engineers of the various countries cooperated and eventually succeeded. One columnist for The Guardian suggested, tongue-in-cheek, that each dome should have a trampoline mounted above it, so that the bombs would bounce right back towards the US. But this was considered in bad taste, and he was fired within days. Grandfather can no longer eat solid foods, so his dinners are put in a blender before they are served. The children enjoy watching the meatloaf and celery turn to sludge. They want to put their own dinners in the blender. At lunchtime, they want to put their peanut butter sandwiches in the blender. Grandfather's inability to eat solid food has brought the family together in a meaningful way. It is night, finally. The stranger sits on a curb on a residential road under the pale yellow glow of a streetlight. He thinks about the book he is writing. A rat tugs at one of his shoelaces, and the stranger reaches out a finger and scratches the huge rodent's head. Every time a metallic thud sounds from above, man and rat flinch. The United States has done a lot of good things, particularly in the areas of literature and Cajun cuisine, but now it's gone crazy. Thanks very much.